Hi, and welcome back to SEO On Air. I'm your host, Aaron, and today we have Jennelle McGrath, CEO of Market Veep. We talk about how marketing has evolved over the years, the importance of pillar pages and topic clusters, and the effective tactics for lead generation and sales. I hope you enjoy this episode. How you started your first company at the age of 18. So,
hmm
one question is, was something like this always what you wanted to do, or did you kind of grow into it over time?
So I think I have always been an entrepreneur at heart. I remember my earliest memories of being like a little kid selling lemonade, and then that wasn't good enough, so I started selling acorns to the neighbors to help the
Right.
squirrels survive the winter. And then we had a gravel driveway at the time, and I sold bags of rocks, and people would stop and actually buy them. So I think maybe at an early age.
And this
But
time, what, at 11, 12, or we're
no,
talking early
like
year?
6 or 7, little.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's been in the blood.
Yeah, and then I had a babysitting business, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be in business in some way. And so, by the time I got to college, I had fallen in love with exercise and training for triathlons, and just loved the activity. And so that's how the fitness business came about, and wanting to help
And
people.
and did you ever, let's say, stop to look back and be like, this might not be the thing I want to continue doing? Or did you kind of always know this is it? I'm going to keep moving forward.
As far as the fitness side.
Right. And let's say a bit of the marketing side as well.
Yeah. So in school, my degree was in business and marketing, and that was the part that I really loved. And I think it took me 14 years of doing the fitness side before I really said, hey, like I am very unhappy, and this is not really what I wanted to do. But I think it took me a long time to come to grips with, this isn't it yet. We haven't reached what I really
Right.
want to fall in love with doing every day.
And how long has it been, just to give like an estimate, since you kind of first started off to now?
I think we're at 8 years, 9 years. Um, yeah, about 8 years, I think. So I was determined to just be a consultant and not have any employees. And that mindset drastically shifted after I realized company culture really plays the root of, a successful business, a happy business, not just profitable, but having happy having a happy work life balance, and having a place that you go to that you really enjoy going to, and the people that you work with. It just makes all the world of difference.
Yeah, and we were talking about this on before the call actually started about how a 4 day week can drastically improve that way.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so I was going to ask, is this something that's always been there at Market Veep, or has this kind of grown into something?
No, we have a lot of really odd company culture initiatives that have come about as time has kind of progressed. And this was one of them that I had read an article. Some place in Europe had, said like, hey, they were experimenting with 4 day week. And at that time we were just so busy. So we couldn't do 4 day week every week. And so
Right.
we compromised and said, we're going to do the first Friday of the month off for personal well being. And then we loved that so much. We're like, how do we have more? Like, we'd have a 3 day weekend, and we'd be like, this is like the best thing ever. Like, we're adults, like, so we can make our own choices and do what we
Right.
want. So, how do we make this part of our business model? And so we do half day Fridays the other 3 weeks. And so that gives us somewhat of a balance of still feeling like we're able to get caught off and not having to rush through things, um,
Right.
but still be able to have like a real break, mentally check
Yeah.
out.
It doesn't kind of disrupt the whole system as well because you're still kind of working 4.5 days.
Yes.
You just
Yep.
feel like it's a day off, but you still put in that effort and not taking, let's say, advantage of it.
Yes. And I think people are super respectful of it too, and like protective of, like, they enjoy it so much, and so they really work super hard to make sure that their stuff is done and they're not letting any teammates down. And it's been just such an awesome evolution to watch, um, how it continues on.
Another thing to talk about in terms of evolution is how marketing has evolved all these years.
Mm.
So, how have you seen it change, and what do you think are some of the factors that kind of influence this change?
I think back to my early days when it was just me as a consultant. I think it was all Google ads and heavy paid campaigns, and then as time kind of progressed, inbound started to become more and more popular and more of a mainstream activity that, you couldn't get away with just paying for that traffic. It was an interesting conversation that you'd have in terms of paid. A lot of times people will be like, well, I skip over all the paid and just go down to the organic. And so starting to have those conversations about, HubSpot and inbound and the benefits of making sure that you're generating, top, middle, and bottom of the funnel content became much more prevalent. And that's really when we started to make that shift um, into incorporating more content in. And then I think now, I mean, it's hard not to talk about AI. I think that there's no way around it. It's all
Yeah.
day, every day, every LinkedIn feed. It's the first one that comes up. So I think that I don't think it will necessarily replace jobs. I think back to other parts of time where, automation, even simple things like automation in car production, I don't think it's going to necessarily completely kill everything, but I think it will
Right.
augment and create new jobs in different ways, um, and just make things better. More,
Yeah, I think to that example as well, car automation, let's say, kind of led the way for more and more mechanics to continue.
hmm
Same thing with AI and marketing as well. While there might be, let's say, some automation involved, you're still going to need some marketers to kind of fine tune it and tweak it.
yeah, I agree
So,
for sure.
in all these changes and the evolution of, let's say, marketing throughout the years with the inclusion of AI, do you feel like there are some practices that have remained the best practices still, like some foundational stuff?
I think nurture, like there's certain pieces that it will get augmented, but I don't think that they're going away. So nurture campaigns, I don't think paid is going anywhere anytime soon. I still think you need a human. I mean, Google has been using AI learning for a long time, and it's still, not what I would envision is hitting the nail on the head and knocking it out of the
Right.
park. So I think that as time goes on, those things will get more fine tuned, but I think we're really still pretty far away from it. But I don't think automation in any capacity is going away. So nurture campaigns, I've seen a lot heavier in terms of sales process automation, even service automation, where, 3 to 4 years ago, people weren't thinking as openly about it. It was a lot more convincing to get them to, not use Excel spreadsheets, where now it's mainstream. If you're not using it, you're really missing out.
Okay, so I've got my website ready. I've done some content here and there. I've done a bit of SEO that I've heard from another podcast. I'm trying to now get my marketing strategy started. So, what would be my first steps to get started, and how do I kind of execute it properly without any hiccups?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is we always start with HubSpot. So everything that is done is tracked and measured. So there's full transparency across sales and marketing. The second piece is really understanding the sales process and what tools you're using there so that it can truly be as seamless, um, and lean into as much automation as possible. So outside of that, how we work is we set up annual plans, rough annual plans, and then quarterly planning based on the goals that you're trying to reach. In your use case, I think you'll need paid, and then we'll do also an assessment of all of the content that you have so that we have a cohesive strategy around creating future content and how best to use the content that you have. A lot of times we find manufacturing might have, some pieces of, let's say, a sell sheet or trade show collateral that's not being used and want to inject that into the digital form of their sales process. And so just finding gaps to repurpose existing assets that have kind of been floating around and just keeping everything organized. The strategy itself, though, I mean, if the goal is website traffic, we're going to double down on, and length of time, let's say 90 days, is going to be the sales process development and automation, workflows in email drip campaigns on the marketing side to nurture the existing database that they have. If they have any trade shows coming up, we're going to want to extract and segment those lists for nurture as well. And so we have everything organized and approved ahead so that we're not having to kind of scramble around and get approval. So for us, for example, we do social a whole month ahead of time and get that approved and deploy, and then do as an ad needed. But the goal really is to have as much done ahead so that there's no friction on the execution end.
Okay. One question is you did mention that in 90 days time, I think that's to kind of see the results as well, right? So how
Correct.
long does the initial audit take to kind of figure out where I'm going wrong and what needs to be fixed?
So we turn that around within 24 hours. The audit part is pretty quick for us. So we'll go through, your competitors, your SEO, any kind of digital footprint. If you have, another CRM, we'll go in there and look at that, any tools that you're using, and then we'll compile a rough game plan based on the goals that we set together. So
Okay,
sometimes people
so
come in with
sorry.
unrealistic goals and want to have 300 leads in their first 30 days, and we're like, well, you have no historical data, we have no system set up, it's physically not feasible and setting up both of us for to not be successful.
Right. So what if I take that situation and kind of twist it a bit to make it a bit more reasonable?
Okay.
We've had a consultation with you. You've told us after 24 hours that, hey, listen, these are some of the problems that you have.
Hmm.
When you're listing out the problems, what if I told you right now that this is the worst website that you've seen in terms of,
We've
in
never
not
seen
a,
any of those.
all right, okay. But in terms of, let's say, the basics are a bit not done properly, let's just assume.
Hmm.
What would you say are, let's say, the top five things that should be looked at? Or what are the top five things you absolutely cannot make this mistake on?
Yeah. So the first one that we look at is the conversion funnels on the homepage. So things that a lot of times we see are like just bad funnels. So we can't have people arriving at a site and paying for ads if they're going to arrive and just never be able to convert. So things like, click to call phone numbers, embedded forms, those in terms of like low hanging fruit are really important. And then I think in terms of just the overall health of the site, so things like broken links, pages that are outdated, and just like basic scrub of the back end, missing meta information, those pieces. But really, the people arriving on the site, what most people don't realize is like, hey, I got to get new customers and I need to get all this new traffic, but they're not capitalizing on the traffic that is already coming to their site if they have a good base coming. And so improving that helps really the low hanging fruit initially. And then all of the back end of those SEO fixes helps us during the long game.
So, how do I put this? Let's say I do take into account those fixes.
Hmm.
I do want to make that unreasonable reasonable. I want to get, let's say, 300 leads, but not in 1 month.
Okay.
I want to get in, let's say, 6 months. That's kind of possible, I guess, right? But
Yep.
with a
That's
shoddy
reasonable.
website like mine, would it be possible to do after 6 months? After, again, also the fixes that we've just talked about.
So if we made all the fixes and you want to hit the 300 leads in 6 months.
Yeah, I think we've got the first step, right? I think the
Yep.
next three or four steps might get us to that 600 leads.
Yep. So at that point, if that is the number that you want in under 6 months, we'll always recommend paid media. Depending on who your ICP is, it might be LinkedIn, it might be Google, it might be a mix. It's very rare we do Facebook unless we have a really good targeted list of B2B, like from a trade show that we're going to target. But we'd still do paid alongside, but it is reasonable. I think it depends on ad budget. And then also the other workaround that we have, if the site still is, let's say, not as beautiful as we would like it, we can do landing pages in HubSpot to kind of work around as we build out, let's say, a whole new site in the back end.
So does this where pillar pages and topic clusters can also help out?
Yes. Not in the 6 months, but definitely I would say in the 12 to 18.
Right,
And they hold their own a lot longer than just a long form piece of content.
right.
So for us, I think the a lot of our clients initially out of the gate until we've had several conversations are looking for immediate I need it like yesterday. And
Right.
so pillar pages and topic clusters as time goes on get built out. But yes, 100% they will help drive significant traffic and hold their own. We've seen some hold steady in those top three spots for years and just not
Right.
move.
So then the question comes to what exactly are pillar pages and topic clusters?
Yeah. So most blogs are, think of scattered dots. They're not really organized. It's just any topic that goes about. Comes to mind, somebody writes in the back end of, so let's say, their WordPress site. The way HubSpot does it is there's, think of like a wheel with spokes. So middle is pillar
Right.
page, and then each arm has a subsequent blog that is related to that topic. One example would be, let's say, a state, and then all of the spokes could either be counties or cities to help drive engagement. It could be a specific product line with all of then the subsequent products that go along to that product line. There's lots of ways to do them.
Okay. So how will, let's say, a business be able to use that spoke to kind of build visibility and authority, I believe?
Yeah. So Google likes them better just because the back end of how they're interlinked. And so the more of these that we have, the easier it is to find those deeper pages within the site. And so the idea is really thinking about the priorities of what you're trying to attract, whether it be, top, middle, bottom of the funnel. If it is truly like this super hyper niche, um, making sure that you have every service line, every product line, the geographies that you want to cover. And it takes some time, right? Like I said, 12 to 18 months for really starting to see traction coming through. But then on top of that, just the volume of how many, you'll need will take some time as well.
So how do I start then? Like, what would
Yeah.
be my first step, and how do I keep moving forward from there?
Yeah. So the first thing would be an audit of the existing content that you have. So we try not to have to start from scratch if we already have content that is floating around. So we'll use the existing content to say, okay, these can get grouped for product A and these can get grouped for product B. Um, and with HubSpot, we would go in and actually they'd live on a subdomain within HubSpot, and they would all get posted within there. And then it makes it really easy for us to do the interlinking and visually see, how many and which ones we're missing, as well as it'll give us and advise us on what SEO needs to happen on them as well.
To kind of get into, let's say, the sales part of things, I've had a lot of conversation about SEO, marketing, and a bit of content here and there as well, but we never really dived in deep into sales, specifically lead generation. So can you tell
Mm-hmm.
me a bit about how to kind of get that started off, and then how to kind of build a strategy around that?
Yeah. So are we still going with our friends, the plumbers?
Yes, yes. Well, at
Okay.
least as far as we can.
Okay. So I think in terms of lead gen on the sales side, what we'll hear is people cold calling or working off this really old list that they're using, but they're not leveraging anything within, um, LinkedIn. And so there's tons of really great LinkedIn strategies there. So leaning into things like um, podcasts, LinkedIn events, webinars, um, really taking full advantage of the trade shows. Like we'll see people go and be like, "What did you do with your list?" You scanned all those badges and not do anything with them. And so we help people develop a plan for their entire sales process, depending on where the leads have been coming in from. And so each one might be slightly different. We have a lot of clients who might have, let's say, a BDR who's doing the outreach, and then an account executive that's closing the deals. And so having completely different pipelines and sales process for each of them that can be heavily automated can make life a lot easier. Within HubSpot, we're using things like the documents tool to measure, when a sell sheet is going out, if the prospect is actually opening it and sending, the sales account exec, hey, this person just downloaded this or just opened your email or was on your sales proposal for this long. Now's a great time to follow up with them. And so really leaning into some of that intelligence in the back end to augment some of the sales process that they're already doing. The other thing we see a lot of times is the sales process is disjointed, where you have 10 salespeople, each salesperson is doing um, completely different things. There's no unity between them. They might have regular sales meetings, but in terms of process wise, it's all over the place. And then from the leadership standpoint, there's no insight into what each one is doing or each team is doing. And so some of the cool tools that we can use, like automated sequences for, let's say, somebody ghosts you, and enroll that person into a drip email that is going out, so that account exec is never going to have to email them again. It's smart enough to know if the person replies back to say, okay, like we don't have to reply again. Now a human can take over from here. And so just making sure that you have the most common things covered. Like we have a list of, ghosting, follow-ups from your meeting, thanks for booking, all of those. We know that those things are inevitably going to happen in the sales process, and automate as much of them as we can.
For, let's say, a situation where I have, let's say, the budget, but I'm not too sure whether I can build a team in house. Should
Mhm.
I outsource or should I spend more time actually building that in house team?
So that's probably the most common, I would say, client that we have is, and then we're used to essentially filling the gaps, more arms and legs. But most people, we get a divide, right? Somebody's like, well, for the cost of an agency, I can get one marketing person, let's say junior to mid
Right.
range. But what happens is that person might have a specialty in SEO or in design, but they don't have the breadth of knowledge across all of these different divisions. You don't want um, me writing your blogs not be a good situation. You want somebody who's really a content creator that can write that, and has an English major, and it is really, that's their thing. So cost wise, I think yes, they may be similar in cost, but benefit wise, as well as like internally, it's going to take additional resources to train this person on
Right.
what you want to do, where an agency comes in and says, okay, day one, here's the strategy, here's the game plan, we can execute faster, and it's just like a plug and play, and you're hitting the ground a little bit faster.
Okay.
And then we have clients who have in-house teams, but they just don't have maybe a specialty in one area, or just need more volume, and they need it fast.
All right. So I think in this situation, let's say as the papa of the papa plumbers, I would probably want to go and outsource it. I
Mhm.
think maybe after a good amount of time, once I've got a good foothold in the industry, maybe then I can start building my internal team.
Yeah.
But how can, let's say, automation, I mean, we've spoken about automation in general, but how can automation help me out in this particular aspect?
It's a holistic approach, right? Like it's not just one avenue. It's not just marketing, it's not just sales, it's not just service. It's the connection between all of them. So for example, we might say, okay, the lead comes in through, your ads are connected in HubSpot. We're going to nurture them with, a gated ebook and emails. The final flow of that is that they are booked, offers them a booking to book directly on the salesperson calendar. They take that automatically goes into their sales pipeline. It creates a deal in their sales pipeline and the subsequent tasks that that salesperson needs to follow up with. And then throughout that, there's automation of it can't move to another deal stage until they've filled out this criteria, all the way through until they fully close. When they close, if they have the service side, it can actually automatically push to the service team. It can enroll them in a pipeline to automatically go through their onboarding, their billing, their contract creation. All of those things can be automated, which essentially just creates clones of your team and your best processes and your best people. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. It's chunking out like the highest priority or where your biggest pain point is first, and then working through the other pieces as time goes on.
So is this also done with HubSpot or are there a variety of tools?
Yep, all HubSpot. There's some tools that will like integrate. So things like maybe your ICP likes prefers text messaging. There's something called Sakari that integrates with HubSpot that we can trigger workflows off of. So there's a lot of really neat secondary tools as well that can get plugged in, but the core of everything is really like the hub of where it's connected in HubSpot.
I feel like this could be pretty much an advertisement for HubSpot. We're
Sorry.
giving as much promotion as we can. And to kind of give a little bit of a balance, can you give some negatives about HubSpot and what might not be, let's say, clear to the eye once you first use it?
Yeah. So I would say the most common thing we hear in terms of a negative that comes up is, hey, I'm getting marketing and sales, but I'm considering, getting the CMS hub in HubSpot. Why would I do it or not do it? I'm on WordPress. And so there's a couple factors that we generally will consider in advising. The first one is how big is the site? How much effort is it going to take to move, a 500 page site versus, a manufacturer site that's maybe 10 pages that, has no visitors, completely different situations. The second piece is how much SEO and traffic is coming from that site. Do you have a heavy blog that has thousands and thousands of blog? It's a much more complicated process to transition that over. Not undoable, just a lot more steps. And so if it's a straightforward, simple, they're really not using their website, great. If it is something that you are ranking number one for everything and you're really, really concerned, we will generally say WordPress there's nothing wrong with just staying on WordPress and connecting it in. And so you'll still get a great benefit out of it. I'd say that's probably the most common like negative thing that we would come across in conversation. And then the second
So,
one is
no, go
similar
ahead.
to Salesforce. So, hey, like I don't want to move. My team loves Salesforce. I don't know why, but they do. And they don't want to get off of it. Same kind of thing. Like that's fine. Like it can stay there. They won't have as much in terms of like sales enablement tools, but there's a way to hybrid them and they can stay where they are. Because our ultimate goal is not to disrupt things that are working or that people are using and liking. It's just to to do more so that they can do less.
To again, it's kind of clear that HubSpot would be the go-to choice. But let's say I'm a very picky client and I really don't want to use HubSpot. Would
Mm-hmm.
you give me an alternative to it, or would you just say no, it's fine, HubSpot is
Yeah,
the
no,
go-to?
we do. We get asked all the time. So we'll get to say, hey, I have Pardot, Marketo, Pipedrive, Zoho, and we just say, I'm sorry. Like we can either migrate you or we can integrate it with it, but we are HubSpot experts and we live and breathe and know all of the tricks. It's too hard across CRMs and tool
Right.
sets to know absolutely everything. And what I found is a lot of the others will charge you like, oh, you want that new cool feature? Here's an upcharge to get that cool feature. Where here, you just natively get them.
Right.
So they grow with you. And yeah, we unfortunately we turn them down, which, kills me. But I'm like, it really is. We believe that this is the best way for businesses to grow.
Continuing the trend of, let's say, sales and lead generation, what exactly is lead scoring?
Mm. So lead scoring is one of the things that I think is highly underutilized within tools. And I think a lot of times salespeople will each have their own idea of what is the perfect lead. So having conversations internally about, truly what makes a good lead, great, is where we like to start the conversation. But lead scoring essentially allows us to say this person that came through the form gets a higher score than this other person that came through and got a lower score because they have filled out the form, they've been to the website 5 times, they have, a certain job title, the company size is a certain, employee size or revenue size. All of these different pieces contribute to how high their score is. The higher their score, we can trigger automation to say, hey, this person follows an entirely different sales process because their lead score is higher. They get an immediate call in this unique follow up or this unique offer. versus somebody who might get a lower score. They'll still get follow-up, but it will be maybe a completely different set of activities. And so lead scoring helps us really focus on, you know, let's say you're getting hundreds of leads. It's hard for a salesperson, I think, to say, okay, how do I determine out of all these leads, who has the greatest likelihood to close the fastest? And so the back end tells us all of this, knowledge and lead intelligence that will then inform us who that person actually is so they can use their time um, the best.
And was this something that was also developed at Market Veep, or is this something that's very common and can be found most places? Just the scoring criteria is a bit different.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's not like a unique thing to us, and it is in the HubSpot tool set. So we set that criteria in the back, but you can do it even without a tool, right? If you have nothing and you're just using Excel sheets, you could have properties in your columns that say, um, the most common things the things we see are like title, company size, revenue size. The part that you wouldn't get in an Excel sheet is like how they've interacted with the other components, like your website, if they've downloaded stuff, how many forms they've filled out. But the core stuff you would be able to kind of identify.
So lead scoring can help out with, let's say, a better, more specific targeted lead approach.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some, again, common mistakes you've seen people when they are trying to get their targeted audience?
I think the biggest one is not taking like a whole team approach. So if there's multiple teams, really taking the time to ask each one, because you could talk to one person, they say, this is the best lead ever. And here's why. And you talk to somebody else and they're like, that's the worst lead ever. So really having team alignment so that you don't set up a scoring system that is tanking one person's close rate and improving the others, and really saying, okay, but why is this? Maybe those are not the criteria that should be used to determine it because it has such a big swing. Maybe there's other core criteria that make them a really good lead.
And are there, let's say, some tips and tricks you can also give us to kind of make sure that whoever is kind of making a targeted lead list, they kind of get their basics right?
I would say start in an Excel sheet and like a Google Doc or Google Sheet and give access to your full team, and then look back through, let's say, your what each salesperson would say is their last 10 best leads that they've closed, and then fill out that form. So, size, revenue, employees, all of those, and then have an open conversation. I've been in some where they get heated, and I've been in some that are super friendly. But the idea is like everybody's on the same team and really working towards the same goal. So the interesting thing is when those conversations start to happen, you're able to, for example, somebody is using a sales copy in their emails that is closing leads faster. If they're sharing it with other people that are territory driven and there's no, competition between them, it just augments everything for the business, but also helps, I think, improve overall morale for the sales team and makes it more of like a team selling effect as opposed to I am like the lone wolf out there trying to like find these leads. Just much better approach.
What would you recommend our viewers and listeners for the top three books of yours?
Mm. So the first one I would recommend is The Amazement Revolution by Shep Hyken. He has a whole series of books around customer experience and customer delight, and really, thinking about that experience as part of, your marketing process, your sales process, not just for service delivery, and what that means in terms of retention. And he looks at big companies, little companies. He does a really great job of making it relatable. The next one is Onward, which is the Starbucks story and some of the things that happened along their way. I love reading about them just because they have not stayed stagnant, in my opinion, and they've constantly looking for new things to do and evolve. And then the third one is Scaling Up, which is a Vern Harnish book. And that's what we use as our infrastructure or our EOS to run the business. And I think it's been a game changer. We've used it for the last 3 years. But we use that like a Bible to go back to, and it's all, lots of highlights and tickets in there.
Another one is some top podcasts that people would recommend. So, do you have three that we would kind of
Yeah.
give a suggestion for everyone?
So I would say My First Million is one, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and The Tim Ferriss Show are three that I enjoy and have a good variety within them.
To kind of give the hypothetical again, I have now got my website up and running. It's doing good on the marketing front. I have understood my sales team and what the goals are. I've built a sales pipeline as well that kind of incorporates everything along with some automation as well. And I've gotten some leads. I think that ultimately was what we were trying to get to.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that I've gotten the leads, how do I cross sell and upsell them? And what exactly would be the benefit of doing that?
There's a bunch of different benefits. I'm of the mindset like we don't want to come across pushy or um, too aggressive in our sales process. But to your point, the upsells and cross sells, a lot of times people don't ask because they don't want to come across that way. And there's some subtle ways to do that. So, email nurtures, we can have automated emails that, are property driven. So, if they buy product A, send a follow up for products B and C automatically and tell them about all the cool functionality of these. And so really understanding the buyer's journey of, which products go together, which are they more likely to be interested in, what things might they want to hop on a call and talk about, um, cross-selling and upselling. I'm trying to think of other, do a lot with automation, like notifying a salesperson of, they might be a good opportunity. Do you want to hop on a call? Or a lot of email campaigns because it's a softer sell until they've really raised their hand.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask if I had to, let's say, start a strategy that can probably get the people to, start cross buying. Is that the term?
Yeah.
What would be, let's say, a step by step guide to getting that done?
To start by having a meeting with the different teams that are going to interact with them. So a lot of times we'll see sales team would be the one closing the deal, but service team would be the one that actually has the hand raise of like this person is interested. So you could have a whole pipeline that is just dedicated to resells, upsells, and then having those notifications in place there. But having initial conversations around when they want to be notified, what makes them a good upsell. We've also done things like you could have a Google form or a HubSpot form that automatically captures the information that they would have to fill out. So if they raise their hand, but you feel the sales team feels like they need to give more criteria, service can send them a form and say, that's great that you're interested in this. Do you mind filling out this quick questionnaire? And that questionnaire can automatically go to the salesperson and they'd schedule a call. It really depends on, I think, the type of product, the price point of the product, and which team touches them.
And what would you say are some, let's say, rookie mistakes that people normally make? There's
Oh,
a whole list of it, huh?
yeah, so many. Which one?
What are the
Which
top
one is
three of
worse?
them?
I think the one that kills me is if they are a customer and there's a active relationship, but then that person has, let's say, gotten a monthly email and they've downloaded an ebook and the salesperson within 3 seconds calls them. It's too much, right? Like as a end user, you're like, I'm interested, but I haven't really raised my hand yet. I'm just trying to learn and educate myself. Um, and the content arrived at the right time, but I'm not ready to have like this deep conversation of like sign away on the dotted line. I think is probably the one that having conversations, that we've had lots of conversations about historically.
Well, thank you for the chat, Janelle. It's been great. Again, I didn't know the one I kind of crossed the time that quickly, but hopefully we can get you for the second episode and we can talk more on that.
That'd be great.
Thanks for watching that episode. I hope you enjoyed. For more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe.